The president opened up that hour-and-a-half appearance before the news media in the East Room of the White House, attacking the news media.
Yes.
Continued it throughout the questioning, and he ended it with the same. We've been hearing a lot of it. The news media is the enemy of the American people. He had this exchange with our own chief White House correspondent, Jim Acosta.
Miles away. That's not an invasion.
Honestly, I think you should let me run the country. You run CNN.
All right.
And if you did it well, your ratings would be much better.
If I may ask one other question, Mr. President, if I may ask one other question, are you worried?
That's enough. That's enough.
Mr. President, I was going to ask one of the other folks.
That's enough.
Pardon me, ma'am. Mr. President,
that's enough.
Mr. President, I had one other question, if I may ask, on the Russia investigation. Are you concerned that you may have?
I'm not concerned about anything with the Russian investigation because it's a hoax. That's enough. Put down the mic.
Mr. President, are you worried about indictments coming down in this investigation?
Mr. President.
I'll tell you what, CNN should be ashamed of itself having you working for them. You are a rude, terrible person. You shouldn't be working.
Let me bring in Jim Acosta now, if I can. I believe he's at the White House. And Jim, that must have been a surreal experience. Obviously, you were being very aggressive, as is the job of a White House correspondent. David Gregory and I are sitting here talking about our experiences. Pissing off everybody in that room, pissing off President Obama, pissing off President Bush, asking questions in a way that made them mad at us. But President Trump did something that I've never seen an American president do, which is go on a personal rant against you for the questions you were attempting to ask.
Well, Jake, when they go low, we keep doing our jobs. I mean, that's the way I look at it. And, you know, I had a question to ask, and if we had played the tape a little bit before that exchange, you would have seen the question that I was asking, which was essentially about this lie that he told before the midterm elections, that this caravan of migrants moving from Central America to the U.S. border with Mexico is somehow an invasion, when it's not. They're still hundreds of miles away, and they pose nothing of a threat to the United States. But the president used that language, obviously, as we've talked about so many times, to galvanize his base. He just didn't like hearing that question. He didn't like being challenged on that point, and he certainly doesn't like being called out for his falsehoods. But of course, Jake, as you were just mentioning, that's our job. That's what we do over here. That's what Wolf did when he was over here as a White House correspondent as well. And we just can't be intimidated by that sort of thing. I was struck by the fact that the president, we thought, was going to come in there and do this victory lap. It sounded very much like a pity party. The way he was talking about lawmakers that wouldn't stand by him on the GOP side in various House races. He seems to be sort of unaware of the fact that his immigration rhetoric and his rhetoric on many levels was just turning off a lot of those suburban swing district voters. That's why people like Mike Kaufman in Colorado were staying away from him. And he just doesn't understand that. I think the other point that needs to be made is that during this press conference, the president time and again seemed to be attacking journalists of color. He was attacking my friend April Ryan, telling her to sit down. At one point, he went after Yamiche Alcindor with PBS, saying that she had a racist question because she asked about this concern out there that when he says he's a nationalist, that's a dog whistle to white nationalists all over the country. It's a very fair question. As a matter of fact, I asked it in the White House Oval Office a couple of weeks ago, and he answered the question there. So I think what we saw from the president, despite the fact that they were framing this as a victory lap and he was tweeting up a storm like, you know, he was all fired up for 2020, he sounded, I thought, very depressed, very despondent, almost defeated in the way he was talking about these election results. And I think that's probably why you saw things spiral out of control. We're not used to, the president's not used to seeing himself lose. And he lost big. He lost the House of Representatives. And while there were a lot of people spinning, well, no, this is not a big loss to the president. There was a red wave in the Senate and so on. What we saw in the East Room during this White House press conference, guys, I think was just really an acknowledgement on the president's part that he does somewhat feel like he lost something yesterday, and that he understands that the job moving forward is going to get a whole lot tougher in this town because he does have the House of Representatives now falling into the Democratic hands. But, you know, as for being called the enemy of the people and so on, Jake, Wolf, all of our folks there who are on the set there with you, I think the American people know. We're friends of the American people. We're going to defend the American people, and we're going to stand up for our rights to seek the truth in this country. And the president can call us all the names in the world, but we're just going to keep doing our jobs.
You know, let me read a statement that CNN has released following your exchange with the president at this news conference and other journalists' exchange, and what the president was saying. This is a statement from CNN. This president's ongoing attacks on the press have gone too far. They are not only dangerous, they are disturbingly un-American. While President Trump has made it clear he does not respect a free press, he has a sworn obligation to protect it. A free press is vital to democracy, and we stand behind Jim Acosta and his fellow journalists everywhere. That statement from the CNN communications department. I'm not going to go back to Jim Acosta. I know he's got a lot going on over there, but that's a very strong statement from CNN.
It's a strong statement from CNN. And look, Jim's exchange with President Trump was not in a vacuum. I mean, President Trump attacked NBC. He attacked PBS. He attacked people from conservative news outlets. He attacks the press. If there's he thinks questions. I mean, if you just read the transcript of what Acosta was asking the president and what President Trump's response was, Acosta was asking about the ads and he was asking about the Mueller investigation. Those are all legitimate lines of inquiry, and that is our job to ask these questions. Now, maybe some people don't like how one reporter asks a question or don't like how another reporter asks a question. It doesn't really matter. The point is the questions. We are supposed to bring them to the president. The president's response was to personally attack Jim Acosta. This is the President of the United States, all right? We're not on equal footing. The president is way up here. Individual reporters are way down here. We are supposed to ask them questions, and yes, they always think we're rude. They always think we're impertinent. Obama thought it. Bush thought it. Clinton thought it. It goes on and on and on. So the idea that CNN is putting out a statement like that is great, and what I like about it the most is they're not just standing up for Acosta, they're talking about everybody in that room.
And on that note, we shouldn't forget, and we mentioned this earlier, but it bears repeating, that the president, not once, not twice, but 3 times, said an African-American reporter's question, legitimate question, about his use of the word nationalist or nationalism and his embracing of that concept, that questioning that is racist. I don't even know where to start with that. It makes no sense at all. The term nationalism, anybody who has studied it for more than 5 minutes has an understanding that, of course, there are racial, not just tinges to it, but there's a racial bent to it. It is and has been used in a very racist way. And whether he knew it or not, he should have known it. And then by making it worse in calling an African-American reporter basically racist, saying her question was racist, but it's not that different.
But that's how he plays.
That's
how he plays.
Remember, John, the first time he said, I'm a nationalist, he opened it by saying, I know I'm not supposed to say this.
So he knew it was the word had baggage.
He knows that word has baggage. He also knew in the last weeks of the campaign where he escalated a legitimate debate about border security, a legitimate debate about illegal immigration, into race baiting and fear-mongering. And now he thinks it worked when he looks at the Senate map. And so that is his default, to go to these confrontations with the press, to accuse people of racism. The interesting thing to me, beyond that, let's take it to another wrinkle, the African-American women journalists asking the question, that was I was trying to make the point earlier about Nancy Pelosi. In addition to the default to race, the default to fear, this president does not like being challenged by women. And so I am just fascinated by the coming relationship if Nancy Pelosi assumes the speakership and Donald Trump is the president. For all this talk of reviving Infrastructure Week and cutting a deal on immigration, Nancy Pelosi, in her own way, Trump does it with bombast. She does it with a little smirk. I'm a negotiator. She wants to be in that room.
Yeah, she will. She will challenge him. But let me just say, today, this extraordinary spectacle that we saw was full of threats and shaming of his own Republican members of Congress and journalists, and it was full of grievance. I mean, here's a man who came out and tried to make the case. This was a great success for me. This is great. We kept the Senate. Look at what I did. I was so important in winning the Senate. And then he devolves into invective and grievance and makes the case that maybe he's not so happy because he did lose the House, but he doesn't want to say it. But just listening to him today, anything that went wrong was about other people. It was about those Republicans who didn't hug him, and it was about the media, and if Nancy Pelosi tries to do anything to me, just wait, I'll get her. So instead of celebrating what he wanted to go out there and celebrate, he let us know how he really felt.
I think we may see, to your point about the relationship, this new world order in Washington, I think there are going to be pretty epic battles over the institutions and the president's attempted destruction of those institutions, because Nancy Pelosi has made that a running argument of her entire fall campaign. She's not going to impeachment. She's not caught up in much about tax returns initially right now, but she does day after day on the campaign trail and in the last 24 hours make this argument about institutions under attack and the Article 1 role in the Constitution and the First Amendment role of the free press. And this president has been on a strategic mission from the day he got in office to chip away at these institutions. And I think we're going to see, now that Democrats have some leg of the stool here of power, I do think we're going to see again and again, they're going to knock heads over this very notion.